So the next question has gotten two assertions. First, in both e-dictionaries and traditional dictionaries, the access to and the retrieval of information is determined by alphabetical organization of the dictionary. And second assertion, in both e-dictionaries and traditional dictionaries, hyperlinks are used to cross-refer. So one is true, but two is false. But okay, both are false. So kindly go ahead and elaborate both of these statements and also tell me why they are incorrect.
Let's break down each assertion to understand why they might be incorrect. Assertion 1. In both e-dictionaries and traditional dictionaries, the access to and the retrieval of information is determined by alphabetical organization of the dictionary. Explanation. Traditional dictionaries. These are usually printed and arranged alphabetically. Users retrieve information by looking up words in alphabetical order, making this statement true for traditional dictionaries. E-dictionaries. While e-dictionaries often offer an alphabetical list of entries, they also provide alternative ways to access information. For example, users can search for words directly using a search bar, bypassing the need for alphabetical browsing. They might also categorize words by themes, usage frequency, or other criteria, not strictly by alphabetical order. Conclusion. This assertion is partially correct, but not entirely true for e-dictionaries. While alphabetical organization exists, it's not the sole method of access or retrieval. Now, assertion 2. In both e-dictionaries and traditional dictionaries, hyperlinks are used to explanation. Traditional dictionaries. These are printed and do not have hyperlinks, as hyperlinks are digital elements that allow users to jump from one piece of content to another with a click. Traditional dictionaries might include cross-references, but these are done through textual indicators like see also or CF. Compare e-dictionaries. These typically use hyperlinks extensively. Users can click on cross-references to quickly jump to related words or topics. Hyperlinks enhance the navigation experience in e-dictionaries, providing a more dynamic and interactive way to access information. Conclusion. This assertion is false for traditional dictionaries, but true for e-dictionaries. The incorrectness lies in assuming that both types of dictionaries use hyperlinks, when, in reality, only e-dictionaries do. Why both assertions are incorrect. Assertion 1 is incorrect because, while alphabetical organization is a common method of access in both dictionary types, e-dictionaries offer additional methods like search functions and thematic categorization, making alphabetical order not the sole determinant. Assertion 2 is incorrect because traditional dictionaries do not use hyperlinks. This feature is exclusive to digital platforms like e-dictionaries. Cross-references in traditional dictionaries are done through non-digital means, such as textual references. This elaboration should help clarify why the statements are not entirely accurate.
Now the next is register. Basically, register is something like a language variety that is particular to one profession. So the options are isoglosses, jargons, linguistic forms used in specific situations, jargons used in specific disciplines, ideas as forms. So the correct answer is jargons used in the specific disciplines. Now, the next question is it has two assertions. The first assertion is that translation itself may be seen as a genere in the abstract. The second assertion is that genere is the function of the total effect of choices made and felt to be intrinsic to any act of translation. Now, please elaborate on what these two statements mean, what genere is, and how does it affect translation? How does it relate with translation?
Let's tackle this step by step, starting with the concept of register and then moving on to the assertions about genre and translation. Register. Register refers to a variety of language that is used in particular social or professional contexts. It's the way language varies according to the situation, audience, and purpose. For example, jargon is a type of register specific to particular professions or disciplines. It includes specialized terms that people outside the field might not understand. In the context of your options, jargons used in specific disciplines correctly defines register as it refers to the specialized language used within a profession or field. Assertion 1, translation itself may be seen as a genre in the abstract. Elaboration. Genre in a broad sense refers to a category of artistic, musical, or literary composition characterized by a particular style, form, or content. Here, the assertion suggests that translation can be considered a genre because it involves a particular set of practices, techniques, and stylistic choices that distinguish it from other forms of writing or communication. Translation isn't just about converting words from one language to another. It also involves making decisions on tone, style, and the way meaning is conveyed, which can be seen as forming a distinct genre. Assertion 2. Genre is the function of the total effect of choices made and felt to be intrinsic to any act of translation. Elaboration. This assertion delves into the idea that the genre of a translation is determined by the cumulative effect of all the choices made during the translation process. These choices could include word selection, sentence structure, tone, and adherence to the original text's style or context. The genre in this context is not just about the type of text, e.g., poetry, prose, but also about the translator's decisions that shape the final product, which contribute to the overall effect and impact of the translation. What is genre, and how does it affect translation? Genre refers to the classification of texts based on their content, form, and style. In literature, we have genres like fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama, etc. In translation, genre plays a crucial role because different genres require different approaches. For example, translating a legal document requires precision and a formal tone, whereas translating a poem might require a more creative and interpretive approach to preserve the original's poetic qualities. Effect on translation. When translating, understanding the genre is essential because it guides the translator in making appropriate choices. For instance, the translator of a scientific article will focus on clarity and accuracy, while the translator of a novel might focus on capturing the narrative's tone and emotion. The genre of the original text sets expectations for the translation, influencing the translator's decisions throughout the process. Relation to the assertions. Assertion 1 views translation itself as a genre because it involves a specific mode of creative and technical decision-making. Assertion 2 highlights how the genre in translation emerges from the sum of all translation choices, each contributing to the final effect and classification of the translated work. In summary, genre in translation is about the interplay between the type of text being translated and the choices the translator makes to maintain or adapt the text's style, form, and function in the new language.
All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question is that a very vital instrument of stylistics, since it deals with variations and the options that are available to the author, is referred to as style as choice. Now, kindly explain what this statement means.
The statement, a very vital instrument of stylistics, since it deals with variations in the options that are available to the author, is referred to as style as choice, is discussing a key concept in the field of stylistics, which is the study of style in language, particularly in literary texts. Elaboration. Style as choice. Style as choice refers to the idea that an author's style is the result of the choices they make from the wide range of linguistic options available to them. These choices include vocabulary, sentence structure, tone, figurative language, and other rhetorical devices, variations, and options. In any given situation, an author can choose from different words, sentence constructions, and stylistic devices to express their ideas. The way these choices are made defines the unique style of the author. For example, choosing between formal or informal language, passive or active voice, and simple or complex sentences all contribute to the overall style of a text. Importance in stylistics. In stylistics, analyzing stylist choice allows scholars and readers to understand how an author's particular choices affect the meaning, tone, and impact of a text. It helps in identifying the distinctive features of an author's writing and how these features contribute to the text's overall effect. Example: consider two sentences conveying the same basic idea. 1, the cat sat on the mat. 2, the sleek black cat languidly sprawled on the worn-out mat. The first sentence is simple and direct, while the second is more descriptive and detailed. The author's choice to use additional adjectives and adverbs in the second sentence creates a different style, one that might be seen as more vivid or expressive. These stylistic choices contribute to the overall feel of the text. Conclusion: style as choice emphasizes that an author's style is not just a random occurrence, but a series of deliberate decisions made from among many possible alternatives. This concept is vital in stylistics because it allows for the exploration of how these choices shape the reader's experience and interpretation of a text.
All right, moving on to the next question. Which of the following is not true for a stored program computer? First, one early motivation for such facility was the need for a program to increment or otherwise modify the address portion of instructions, which had to be done manually in early designs. Second, a stored program design also allows for self modifying code. Third, it is a fixed program computer. Fourth, a stored program computer includes.
Let's break down each option to determine which one is not true for a stored program computer. Option 1. One early motivation for such a facility was the need for a program to increment or otherwise modify the address portion of instructions, which had to be done manually in early designs. True. In early computers, before the stored program concept was developed, programs were often hardwired or manually set up, making it difficult to modify instructions. The stored program concept allowed instructions and data to be stored in the computer's memory, which could then be modified or updated as needed without manual intervention. This was indeed one of the motivations behind developing stored program computers. Option 2. A stored program design also allows for self-modifying code. True. Stored program computers allow both instructions and data to be stored in memory, making it possible for the program itself to modify its instructions while it is running. This is known as self-modifying code, which, while less common in modern programming, was an important capability in early computer systems. Option 3. It is a fixed program computer. False. This statement is not true for a stored program computer. The key characteristic of a stored program computer is its flexibility. Programs can be stored in memory and changed or updated without changing the hardware. In contrast, a fixed program computer has its instructions hardwired into its design, making it inflexible and unable to modify its operations without changing the physical wiring or configuration. Conclusion: the statement "it is a fixed program computer" is not true for a stored program computer. Stored program computers are the opposite of fixed program computers. They are designed to be flexible, allowing programs to be stored, modified, and executed from memory.
Now, the last option in the same question regarding the stored program computer was a stored program computer includes by design an instruction set and can store in memory a set of instructions that details the computation. Now, explain this statement in the context of stored program computer.
Certainly. The statement, "a stored program computer includes by design an instruction set and can store in memory a set of instructions that details the computation," is fundamental to understanding how modern computers operate. Let's break this down in the context of a stored program computer. Stored program computer concept. A stored program computer is one where the instructions programmed that tell the computer what to do are stored in the computer's memory alongside the data that it processes. This is in contrast to earlier designs, where instructions were hardwired into the machine. Key elements: 1. Instruction set. Instruction set refers to the collection of instructions that the computer's CPU can execute. These instructions are basic operations like addition, subtraction, data movement, and logical operations. The design of the stored program computer includes this instruction set, allowing the CPU to interpret and execute the instructions stored in memory. Each instruction in the set is typically represented in binary and corresponds to a specific operation that the CPU can perform. Memory storage. In a stored program computer, the instructions that make up a program are stored in the same memory as the data they operate on. This means that both the program and the data can be dynamically modified, which is a key advantage of this design. Set of instructions. This refers to the actual program or code that tells the computer how to perform specific computations. In a stored program computer, this set of instructions is loaded into memory and executed by the CPU sequentially or as directed by control flow structures like loops and conditional statements. Context and importance. The ability to store both instructions and data in memory is what enables computers to be so versatile. They can run different programs at different times without needing to change the hardware. This design is the basis of all modern computing. For instance, when you run a program on your laptop, the program's instructions are loaded into memory from storage, like a hard drive or SSD, and the CPU reads and executes these instructions to perform the required tasks. Conclusion. The statement highlights two critical aspects of stored program computers. The instruction set provides the CPU with the basic operations it can perform. The ability to store a set of instructions in memory allows the computer to perform a wide variety of computations simply by changing the program loaded into memory. This is what makes stored program computers so powerful and flexible, laying the foundation for modern computing as we know it.
All right, moving on to the next question has two assertions. First, both interpreters and compilers are written in some high-level programming languages and they are translated into machine code. Second assertion, a compiler is generally slower than an interpreter because it processes and interprets each statement in a program as many times as the number of evaluations of each statement. Now, so one is true, but two is false. So first assertion that both interpreters and compilers are written in some high-level programming languages as they are translated into machine code is true. But the second assertion that a compiler is generally slower than an interpreter because it processes and interprets each statement in a program as many times as the number of evaluations of each statement is incorrect. And so I know, as far as I know, a compiler generally, it compiles everything into one and then executes everything at once. But here it says that a compiler is slower than an interpreter because it interprets each statement at a time. So this is not correct about the compiler. Now, can you put your views, but not be elaborate too much. Don't take too much time. Not be elaborate at the same time is what I meant. So don't take much time. Be a little concise in your explanation and explain to me both of these assertions.
Certainly. Assertion 1. Both interpreters and compilers are written in some high-level programming languages, and they are translated into machine code. True. Both interpreters and compilers can be written in high-level languages, and they eventually need to be translated into machine code for execution. Assertion 2. A compiler is generally slower than an interpreter because it processes and interprets each statement in a program as many times as the number of evaluations of each statement. False. This is incorrect. A compiler translates the entire program into machine code before execution, making it typically faster during runtime. An interpreter executes code line by line, which is usually slower because it processes each statement repeatedly during execution. So the first assertion is correct, while the second assertion incorrectly describes the function of a compiler versus an interpreter.
Moving on to the next question. So, which of the following is not a part of Indo WordNet? First option, Indo Aryan WordNet. Second, Dravidian WordNet. Third, Northeast WordNet. Fourth, Indradhanush project. So, I think yes, Indo Aryan WordNet is not a part of the Indo WordNet. Now, tell me about the Indo WordNet. It has Dravidian WordNet, Northeast WordNet, and Indradhanush project. Now, tell me about all of these correct options in specific. Like, what does the Dravidian WordNet include? What does the Northeast WordNet include? And then go on to explain what Indo WordNet actually is and what it includes. So, and who initiated this project, and the related names is what I mean. And then when was it initiated, and by whom, which organization was it initiated? So, all of this information. But do not be too elaborate, but do not miss out on anything. Please do not compensate with the quality of information. Do not compensate with that at all. Take as much time as you want. I'm just asking you because I don't have much time. So information, I have to be precise at that. So all of the information that you can gather.
Certainly. Let's dive into each component of IndoWordNet and the project itself. IndoWordNet. IndoWordNet is a multilingual lexical database that is part of the WordNet network. It aims to provide a unified WordNet across various Indian languages, facilitating cross-linguistic semantic research and applications. Components. One Dravidian WordNet includes WordNet for Dravidian languages like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam. Purpose. It captures the lexical and semantic relationships in these languages, aligning them with the global WordNet structure. 2 Northeast WordNet includes WordNet for languages spoken in Northeast India, such as Assamese, Manipuri, and other regional languages. Purpose. Similar to the Dravidian WordNet, it provides semantic resources for these languages and integrates them into the broader Indo-WordNet framework. 3. Indradhanush project includes. This is an overarching project that includes Dravidian WordNet and Northeast WordNet, among others. Purpose. To develop and maintain a comprehensive WordNet for the Indian languages and facilitate linguistic research and technological applications. Indo-WordNet project, initiated by. The project was initiated by the International Institute of Information Technology, IIT, in Hyderabad. Start date, it began around 2007. Goal, to create a multilingual lexical database that links several Indian languages with WordNet, enhancing cross-linguistic studies and applications. Summary. Indo-WordNet is a collaborative effort to build a network of lexical databases for Indian languages. Dravidian WordNet covers Dravidian languages. Northeast WordNet covers languages from Northeast India. Indradhanush project is the broader initiative encompassing these WordNet projects. The project was initiated by 3T Hyderabad to support linguistic research and applications in Indian languages.
The next is GPSG, that is Generalized Phrase Structure Grammar. This was proposed by Gazdar. I want you to tell me about the Generalized Phrase Structure Grammar, what it is, how it works, and all of the relevant information about GPSG. And okay, yeah, do that.
Generalized Phrase Structure Grammar, GPSG, is a type of generative grammar introduced by Gerald Gazdar in the 1980s. It's designed to provide a flexible and broad framework for describing syntactic structures in natural languages. Key features of GPSG. 1. Phrase structure rules. GPSG extends traditional phrase structure grammars by incorporating more complex rules and constraints. It uses phrase structure rules to define how sentences and other syntactic structures are built from smaller units. 2. Generalization. One of the main goals of GPSG is to capture common patterns across different languages by generalizing syntactic rules. This allows for a more unified approach to describing various languages' syntax. Feature structures. GPSG employs feature structures to manage grammatical information. Features like tense, number, and case are used to represent and constrain syntactic rules and relationships. 4. Lexical entries. Lexical entries in GPSG include both syntactic and semantic information. Words are associated with complex feature structures that determine their syntactic behavior. 5. Constraint-based. The grammar is constraint-based, meaning it focuses on specifying constraints that define possible syntactic structures rather than generating all possible structures. This makes it highly adaptable to different languages. 6. Parsing. GPSG provides a framework for parsing sentences by using these generalized rules and constraints. It can generate and analyze syntactic structures efficiently. How GPSG works. Syntax description. GPSG describes the syntax of a language using a set of rules and constraints that apply across various syntactic structures. These rules define how different parts of a sentence can combine to form grammatically correct sentences. Feature structures. The grammar uses feature structures to represent various grammatical attributes and their interactions. These structures help in capturing complex syntactic phenomena. Flexibility. GPSG's generalizations and constraints allow it to be applied to multiple languages, providing a broad framework for linguistic analysis. Summary. Introduced by Gerald Gazdar in the 1980s. Purpose. To offer a flexible and general framework for describing syntactic structures across languages. Key features. Phrase structure rules, feature structures, lexical entries, and constraint-based parsing. GPSG is an influential approach in syntax theory, known for its ability to generalize across languages and its emphasis on feature structures and constraints.
The next is Prolog. Prolog is associated with Alain Colmejoch. Colmejoch seems like a French name. So I want you to explain what Prolog is, what it does. When did Alain Colmejoch?
It seems there might be a mix-up with the name and details. Prolog, short for Programming in Logic, is a logic programming language and not associated with Alan Kolmogorov. Instead, it was developed by Alan Kolmogorov and his team in the early 1970s. What Prolog is: 1. Logic programming language. Prolog is a high-level programming language based on formal logic. It's used for solving problems related to artificial intelligence and computational linguistics. 2. Declarative nature. In Prolog, you describe the problem in terms of facts and rules, and the system uses logical inference to find solutions. You specify what you want to achieve rather than detailing how to achieve it. 3. Facts and rules. Facts. Basic assertions about data. For example, parent John Mary states that John is a parent of Mary. Rules. Logical statements that define relationships between facts. For example, grandparent XY, parent ZY, means that X is a grandparent of Y if X is a parent of Z and Z is a parent of Y. 4. Querying. You can query the Prolog system to find information or solve problems based on the facts and rules defined. The system uses a process called resolution to answer queries. 5. Applications. Prolog is used in fields like natural language processing, expert systems, and knowledge representation. It's particularly useful for problems involving pattern matching and symbolic reasoning. Background. Developed by Alan Kolmogorov and his team. Initial release. Early 1970s. Purpose. To provide a practical language for expressing logic and reasoning tasks, particularly in AI and computational linguistics. Prolog stands out for its ability to handle complex relationships and reasoning tasks through a declarative approach, making it a powerful tool in various AI applications.
All right, the next question is so it has two assertions. The first assertion is that Chomsky in the year 1993 revived the copy theory of movement, according to which a moved element leaves behind a trace instead of a copy. Now, the second assertion is that the conceptual underpinning for the revival of the copy theory is provided by the inclusiveness condition, a conceptual condition confining to the power of syntax. So, two is true, but one is false. So, two is true, meaning that the second assertion is true, that the conceptual underpinning for the revival of the copy theory of of the copy theory is provided by the inclusiveness condition, which is a conceptual condition which confines to the power of syntax. So the inclusiveness condition. So explain what explain me what the inclusiveness condition is, right? And the first assertion is not correct. Chomsky in the year 1993 revived the copy theory of movement, according to which a moved element leaves behind a trace instead of a copy. I don't know why the network is not working. It's bombed. That's how you say it. मेरा दिल दिल कल्याणा तू कर दे हाँ तू कर दे हाँ नेपाल मेरी बाह विच बाह तू कर दे हाँ तू कर दे. Hmm. So what I was going to look for is नेपाल मेरी बाह विच बाह तू कर दे तक 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 नशा समझ में I should have had this one, next previous thing. But ironically, I don't. Okay, so that's about. So the question was, hello, can you hear me? Bloody, it doesn't work. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Why the fuck is? I don't know. I, hmm. निपाला मेरी बाहों विच बात तू करते हैं, तू करते हैं. Okay, I have hit the limit. You have crossed. You have crossed the limit. You bloody Indian. You have crossed the limit. तेनू तक तक नशा दाई जिया हो गया समझ न लगे यार की मैनू हो गया दिया मैनू हर थां दिया मैनू हर थां. Hmm. So question 56 has two assertions. Hmm. So you have received the new set of questions. What I want you to do is I want you to elaborate for the things that I ask, and then ask me questions. Give me the question along with the corresponding answers to the questions, and I wait for me to respond back, and then reassure if I'm correct or incorrect, and then move on to the next question. So so the question is, first question is the assertion. First assertion is that Chomsky in the year 1993 revived the copy theory of movement, according to which a moved element leaves behind a trace instead of a copy. The second assertion is that the conceptual underpinning for the revival of the copy theory is provided by the inclusiveness condition, which is a conceptual condition that confines the power of syntax. Now, what I want you to do is that I want you to elaborate on why the first assertion is correct or is incorrect in detail. So, Chomsky in the year 1993, he revived the copy theory of movement. Why is that incorrect?
All right, let's break down the first assertion.
Okay, so explain to me why is the first assertion incorrect?
The first assertion is incorrect because it misrepresents the copy theory of movement. In the earlier theories, specifically before 1993, the idea was that when an element moves in a sentence, it leaves behind a trace. This trace was essentially a placeholder indicating where the element originally was. However, in 1993, Chomsky actually revived the copy theory of movement, where instead of leaving just a trace, the moved element leaves behind a copy of itself. The key difference is that under the copy theory, both the original position and the new position contain copies of the element, which can later be deleted at one of the positions during the syntactic derivation. So the assertion that a moved element leaves behind a trace instead of a copy is incorrect, because under the copy theory, a moved element leaves behind a copy, not just a trace. The trace-only view was more aligned with earlier theories, not the 1993 revival by Chomsky. Would you like to go over the second assertion now?
So it leaves behind it leaves behind a copy instead of a trace. That's the only difference that is causing this assertion to be false. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The difference is that in the copy theory of movement, a moved element leaves behind a copy of itself rather than just a trace. This shift in theory is what makes the first assertion incorrect. Would you like to dive into the second assertion now?
Yes. Explain to me what the second assertion means, what inclusiveness condition really is.
The second assertion states that the conceptual underpinning for the revival of the copy theory is provided by the first assertion. This means that the reasoning or the theoretical basis for bringing back the copy theory of movement is tied to the idea mentioned in the first assertion. However, since the first assertion is incorrect because it mistakenly says that the moved element leaves a trace instead of a copy, the second assertion is also problematic. The conceptual foundation for the revival of the copy theory can't be based on a misunderstanding of the theory itself. Now, the inclusiveness condition is a principle introduced by Chomsky that plays a key role in the minimalist program. It essentially states that syntactic operations should not introduce any new elements that were not present in the initial numeration, the set of lexical items selected for a sentence. In other words, the syntax should not add anything that wasn't already in the input. It can only rearrange or manipulate what's already there. The revival of the copy theory aligns with the inclusiveness condition because when elements are moved, they leave behind a copy, which was already part of the initial numeration, rather than introducing a new trace. This supports the idea that the syntax doesn't add anything new, it just copies existing elements. Does that make sense? If so, do you agree that the second assertion is also problematic?
So, in simple terms, what does the second assertion mean? Does it mean that because copy theory, it talks about rearranging of the constituents within the sentence? It does not talk about adding something new. Is the reason why the second assertion is incorrect, and what the second assertion really means in simpler terms? Because the conceptual underpinning of the revival of the copy theory is provided by the inclusiveness condition. What's the fault, and what, like, explain to me that in simpler terms. Do not be too elaborate. It's taking too much time.
Sure, in simpler terms, the second assertion is saying that the reason Chomsky brought back the copy theory in 1993 is based on a certain principle. This principle, called the inclusiveness condition, says that when we move parts of a sentence around, we shouldn't add anything new, just rearrange what's already there. The problem with the second assertion is that it connects this revival of the copy theory to the idea in the first assertion, which was incorrect. So, the second assertion is trying to justify the copy theory based on something that's not true. In summary, the second assertion is incorrect because it tries to explain the revival of the copy theory using a false idea. Does that clear things up?
I don't really get it. I don't understand what this really means. So, um, what what is the problem? Like, how can the second assertion be justified? What can you like replace this second assertion with in order for it to be true?
I understand it can be a bit confusing. Let me break it down more clearly. The second assertion is trying to say that Chomsky revived the copy theory in 1993 because of the inclusiveness condition. But this doesn't make sense because the inclusiveness condition doesn't directly explain why the copy theory was revived. It just tells us we shouldn't add anything new when we rearrange sentence parts. The problem is that the second assertion tries to connect the revival of the copy theory with a specific reasoning, inclusiveness condition, that doesn't fully justify it. To make the second assertion true, we could replace it with something like this. The conceptual underpinning for the revival of the copy theory is provided by the need to maintain consistency in sentence structure during movement. This new assertion focuses on the idea that the copy theory was brought back to keep sentences consistent, which aligns better with the theory's purpose. Does this help?
So now I'm able to differentiate between inclusiveness condition and what the conceptual underpinning of revival of the copy theory is. So inclusiveness condition talks about not bringing in any other element other than the already existing constituents of a sentence, whereas the so am I correct as far as I've come?
Yes, you're on the right track. The inclusiveness condition is about not introducing new elements into the sentence structure, just working with what's already there. On the other hand, the conceptual underpinning of the revival of the copy theory is more about ensuring consistency in how elements of a sentence are moved or rearranged. The copy theory says that when something in a sentence moves, a copy is left behind, which helps maintain a clear and consistent sentence structure. So yes, you've got the right idea. The inclusiveness condition is about keeping things contained within the existing structure, while the copy theory focuses on how that structure remains consistent during movement. Does that match what you were thinking?
Yes, yes, it certainly does.
Great. I'm glad it's making sense now. If you have any more questions or need further clarification, feel free to ask.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Next question. So, the second assertion should have been, the second assertion in the context of the copy theory question should have been that the conceptual underpinning for the revival of the copy theory is provided by the situation that no new elements are introduced, and that the constituents, the moved constituents, can be traced to their original positions. That should have been the second assertion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're right. second assertion should reflect the idea that the revival of the copy theory is grounded in the fact that no new elements are introduced and that the original positions of the moved constituents can still be identified. This would correctly connect with the conceptual underpinning of the copy theory of movement. Ready to move on to the next question?
And the inclusiveness condition talks about not introducing new elements in the sentence. Correct?
The inclusiveness condition ensures that when elements are moved within a sentence, no new elements are added. It's all about keeping the structure contained within the original constituents. Shall we go on to the next question?
Yes, let's go on to the next question. First assertion is that Chomsky, 1995, argues that a head can have as many specifiers as it has features licensing them, the so called multiple spec hypothesis. The second assertion is that, as per the multiple spec hypothesis, Chomsky in 1995 does not abolish AGR as a separate head which can project its own phrase. Now, I want you to explain what these both of these assertions really mean.
Got it. For the first assertion, Chomsky in 1995 introduced the multiple specifier hypothesis, which suggests that a head can have multiple specifiers, each corresponding to a feature it has. This is about how many specifiers a head can have. For the second assertion, it states that Chomsky did not eliminate AGR as a separate head that can have its own phrase. This would mean that AGR, agreement, is still considered a distinct head with its own projections. So based on this, the first assertion is true. Chomsky did argue that a head can have multiple specifiers. The second assertion is also true. Chomsky did not abolish AGR as a separate head in this framework. Do you agree with this?
I actually don't, but because the question says that here I have an application where the correct answer says that the second assertion is not correct.
I see. If the second assertion is marked incorrect, it means that, according to Chomsky's 1995 theory, AGR was indeed redefined or integrated in a way that didn't maintain it as a separate head with its own projection. In other words, Chomsky's framework in 1995 likely involves the idea that AGR isn't treated as an independent head in the same way it might have been in earlier theories. So the second assertion doesn't fit with this view, even though it might seem that way at first glance. Does that help clarify things?
So if that is the condition, then what assertion could replace the second assertion?
A correct replacement for the second assertion could be, according to the multiple specifier hypothesis, Chomsky, 1995, does integrate AGR into the head system rather than treating it as a separate head that projects its own phrase. This would align with the idea that AGR is not maintained as a distinct, separate head, but is incorporated into the system of heads described in the theory.
What I want you to do is what I want you to do is I want you to elaborate in simple terms what the second assertion really means when it says that, as per the multiple spec hypothesis, Chomsky in the year 1995 does not abolish AGR as a separate head which can project its own phrase. Does it mean that he does abolish AGR as a separate head? And yeah.
The second assertion means that, according to the multiple specifier hypothesis in Chomsky's 1995 work, AGR is not abolished as a separate head that can project its own phrase. In simpler terms, it suggests that AGR remains a distinct head that can still have its own projection in the sentence structure. However, this assertion is incorrect because Chomsky's 1995 framework actually integrates AGR differently, meaning AGR is not treated as a separate head, but as part of the head's own system. So the correct view is that Chomsky did abolish AGR as a separate head, contrary to what the second assertion claims.
All right, so both of these assertions, a summation of these two assertions could be the following: that Chomsky in the year 1995, he argued that a head can have multiple specifiers, as it has features licensed in them. So, as many features, that many specifiers. This is termed as the multiple spec hypothesis or the multiple specifier hypothesis. And the second assertion should have been that, as per the multiple specifier hypothesis, Chomsky in the year 1995 abolishes agreement as a separate head, and it separates agreement as a separate head from agreement as being part of part of a phrase structure. For example, agreement being part of the inflectional phrase.
Yes, that's correct. To summarize, 1. First assertion. Chomsky argued that a head can have as many specifiers as it has features, which is the multiple specifier hypothesis. 2. Second assertion, revised. According to this hypothesis, Chomsky abolishes AGR as a separate head, integrating it into the head system rather than having it as an independent element projecting its own phrase. This revised understanding reflects the changes in how AGR is treated in Chomsky's 1995 framework.
Moving on to the next question: which of the following is not true of procrastinate? Procrastinate is a combination of copy plus merge chain. Procrastinate is not included in systems that appeal to local economy as an economy principle. Procrastinate requires global, that is, transderivational economy. Procrastinate minimizes the number of overt operations necessary for convergence. So, the one that is not correct about procrastinate is that it is a combination of copy plus merge chain. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to elaborate what these statements mean in context of procrastinate, what procrastinate is, and explain what it means when someone says procrastinate is not included in systems that appeal to local economy as an economy principle. So
Procrastinate in linguistic theory is a principle related to how syntactic operations are managed. It suggests that rather than making changes to the structure immediately, a language may delay or procrastinate on certain syntactic operations until necessary. This approach aims to reduce the number of changes or operations required to achieve a well-formed structure. 1. Combination of copy plus merge chain. This statement is not true. Procrastinate is not about combining the copy theory and merge operations. It's a separate idea that deals with when and how changes are applied, not with the mechanics of how elements are copied or merged. 2. Not included in systems that appeal to local economy. This means procrastinate in systems that focus on local operations for efficiency. Local economy principles look at how changes within a small part of a sentence are optimized, while procrastinate is concerned with overall efficiency and delay tactics, which is more global. 3. Requires global, transderivational economy. This statement is true. Procrastinate focuses on global efficiency, meaning it deals with how operations affect the entire derivation across different parts, rather than just localized changes. 4. Minimizes the number of overt operations necessary for convergence. This is also true. By delaying certain operations, procrastinate aims to reduce the number of overt changes required to produce a grammatically correct structure. So, in summary, procrastinate is about delaying certain syntactic operations to optimize overall efficiency and is not a combination of copy theory and merge, nor is it concerned with local economy principles.
So explain to me in simple terms what mechanism goes behind procrastinate, which differentiates it from being a combination of copy plus merge chain.
Procrastinate is about delaying certain syntactic operations to avoid unnecessary changes during sentence formation. Instead of immediately applying all changes as elements move around, procrastinate suggests waiting until it's absolutely necessary. This differs from a combination of copy plus merge chain. In copy theory, a moved element leaves behind a copy, while merge combines elements into a structure. Procrastinate doesn't involve copying or merging elements directly. It's more about timing the application of these operations to streamline the process.
Now explain to me in simple terms what it means when someone says procrastinate is not included in systems that appeal to local economy as an economy principle. In simple terms, and really, what's the overall impact of this statement being, statement being put in in the justification of procrastinate.
When we say procrastinate is not included in systems that appeal to local economy, it means procrastinate doesn't fit within approaches that aim to optimize language processing by focusing only on immediate local changes. In simple terms, local economy principles look at how to make sentence formation efficient by focusing on small, immediate steps. Procrastinate, however, involves delaying some operations to a later point, which doesn't fit with this approach. The overall impact is that procrastinate is more about a broader global strategy rather than immediate local efficiency.
Now, what does it mean when the statement says procrastinate requires global, that is transderivational economy? What does transderivational, the term, mean in simpler terms?
Transderivational, in simpler terms, refers to looking at the whole process of sentence formation rather than just individual steps. When we say procrastinate requires global or transderivational economy, it means that procrastinate considers the efficiency of the entire derivation process, not just local or immediate changes. Essentially, it focuses on how the entire sentence structure is formed and how delaying certain operations affects the overall efficiency.
Now explain to me what it means when someone says procrastinate minimizes the number of overt operations that are necessary for convergence.
When someone says procrastinate minimizes the number of overt operations necessary for convergence, they mean that procrastinate aims to reduce the number of visible or explicit steps needed to make a sentence grammatically correct. In other words, it tries to streamline the process by which a sentence reaches its final correct form, avoiding unnecessary or redundant operations.
Now the next question is an optional unordered operation that splits a structural description, sending part of information to the PF, that is phonetic form, and part to LF, that is logical form, is spell out. Now explain to me what spell out is and what this statement means in the context of spell out.
Spellout is a process in which parts of a syntactic structure are sent to different levels of representation. In simpler terms, it's where some information is sent to the phonetic form, PF, which deals with how the sentence sounds, and some is sent to the logical form, LF, which deals with meaning. So, when we say an optional unordered operation that splits a structural description, it means that spellout can choose to divide and allocate information between how something is pronounced and how it's understood in terms of meaning.
How does it do that?
Spell out works by breaking down the syntactic structure into components that are handled by different modules. Specifically, during spell out, the structure of a sentence is divided into parts. The phonetic form PF gets the details about how to pronounce the sentence, like sounds and stress patterns. Meanwhile, the logical form LF deals with meaning, such as the relationships between words and their roles in the sentence. This division allows the sentence to be both correctly pronounced and meaningfully interpreted.
Now, next, the Filipino language is VSO word order language. Now, I want you to give me instances of such word order in the Filipino language, and not just instances, but also exemplify one of the sentences in the Filipino language which has the VSO word order. And yes, and which family does Filipino belong to? So things like that. So some information about the language as well. Like what other languages have influenced Filipino to what it is today. Things like that.
The Filipino language, also known as Tagalog, typically follows a verb subject object VSO word order. For example, in a sentence like Kumain ang bata ng mansanas, the child ate an apple. Kumain is the verb ate, ang bata is the subject, the child, and ang mansanas is the object, an apple. Filipino belongs to the Austronesian language family, specifically the Malayo-Polynesian branch. It has been influenced by Spanish due to over 300 years of colonization, which introduced many Spanish loanwords into Filipino. Additionally, English has had a significant impact, especially in modern vocabulary.
Manzana actually means apples in the Spanish language. Mm, so look at this. For example, in the sentence, Kumain ang bata ang bata ang mansanas. Kumain ang bata ang mansanas. Child ate an apple. Kumain is the verb, okay? Kumain ang bata ang mansanas. So kumain is the verb. Ang bata is the subject, the child. Acha. Ang bata, verb, subject, and then the object. Ang mansanas is the object and apple. So kumain ang bata ang mansanas. Kumain is the verb, ang bata is the subject, a child, and then ang mansanas is an apple. That's indeed some cool description of it. Kumain ang bata ang mansanas. समझे? यही बात है. कुमाइन ang bata ang mansanas. So that's about Filipino. Now let's move on to the next question. The next question has two assertions. The first assertion is that a vowel is defined as a vowel-like segment that occupies the nucleus of a syllable. The second assertion is that a segment is considered to be a vocoid when its articulation permits the relatively close passage of air through the center of the mouth. Now, what I want you to do is, like the first assertion is completely true, that a vowel defined as a vowel-like segment that occupies the nucleus of a syllable, that's true. The second assertion is that a segment is considered to be a vocoid when its articulation permits the closed passage of air through the center of the mouth. So if the passage of air through the mouth is through the center of the mouth, then that is termed to be a vocoid. So this is not correct about vocoid. This explanation of vocoid sound is not correct. So can you elaborate on what a vocoid sound really is?
Certainly. A vocoid is a sound that has vowel-like qualities, but isn't quite a full vowel. It often referred
क्या है इतना पैसा में इतना ही मिलेगा so yeah, explain to me what is a vocoid.
A vocoid is a sound that has some characteristics of a vowel, but isn't a full vowel. It's typically more constricted than a vowel, but less so than a consonant. For instance, in English, sounds like W and J are vocoids. They act like vowels in certain contexts, but still have a bit of constriction in the mouth. Essentially, vocoids are semi-vowel sounds that bridge the gap between vowels and consonants.
W and J, W and J. So, why is it incorrect to say about vocoid that its articulation permits the closed passage of air through the center of the mouth?
It's incorrect because vocoids don't involve a completely closed passage of air. Instead, they have a partial constriction, allowing some air to pass through. Sounds like W and J involve constriction, but still let air flow relatively freely,
Wow.
unlike
Yeah.
fully closed sounds where air is blocked completely.
Moving on to the next question. In signal processing, what is any type of system that acts on an input signal to yield an output signal whose action changes the frequency content of the input? So, it's a type of system which acts on the input signal to yield the output signal and whose action changes the frequency content of the input. So, the correct answer is filter. Now, explain to me what filter is and how does this statement relate to explaining the mechanism behind filter.
A filter in signal processing is a system that modifies the frequency content of an input signal. It does this by allowing certain frequencies to pass through while attenuating or blocking others. For example, a low-pass filter lets through low frequencies and blocks high frequencies. This changes the original signal's frequency content and is why filters are used to isolate or remove specific frequency components from signals.
Could you elaborate in simpler terms what you just explained?
Sure, a filter is like a sieve for sound or signals. It lets certain parts, like low or high pitches, pass through while blocking others. So, if you have a mix of different sounds, a filter can help you hear only the ones you want by changing which frequencies are allowed to pass.
Now, what does this statement tell about the filter and its working mechanism? That in the signal processing, filter is a type of system which acts on an input signal to yield an output signal whose action changes the frequency content of the input. And I want you to explain this in simpler terms.
This statement means that a filter takes a signal and changes its frequency. For example, if you have a signal with a mix of high and low pitches, A filter can adjust it so you hear just the high or low pitches more clearly. It modifies the signal by changing which frequencies are stronger or weaker in the output.
But why do we need to modify the frequencies at all?
We modify frequencies to either enhance or reduce certain aspects of a signal, making it clearer or more useful. For instance, in music, a filter can help emphasize specific instruments or reduce background noise. In communication, it can help clear up a signal for better reception.
All right, the next question is a linguistic model proposing that the observed forms of language arise from the interaction between conflicting constraints. A linguistic model which proposes that the observed forms of language they arise from the interaction between conflicting constraints is certainly the optimality theory, because it is what talks about the constraints. Now, give me a detailed explanation of who proposed the optimality theory, when was it proposed, and what really goes on behind the mechanism of how it functions and how it helps to do what it does. So yeah, go ahead and do that.
Optimality theory, proposed by linguists Alan Prince and Paul Smolensky in 1993, is a model that explains how languages generate the forms they do. Instead of having a single fixed rule for how language works, optimality theory suggests that languages follow a set of competing constraints. Here's how it works. 1. Constraints. There are two types of constraints: markedness constraints, which prefer more common, simpler forms, and faithfulness constraints, which prefer forms that closely match the underlying abstract representations of words. 2. Violable constraints. Constraints can be violated, but only to satisfy higher priority constraints. This means that some constraints are more important than others. 3. Generator. The system generates all possible forms of a word or sentence based on its underlying representation. These forms are then evaluated against the constraints. The form that best satisfies the highest priority constraints, while possibly violating lower priority ones, is selected as the optimal form. This approach helps explain why different languages have different patterns. For example, one language might prioritize being faithful to the underlying form, while another might prioritize easier to pronounce forms.
So can you exemplify in detail what this really means, and also elaborate it in simpler terms, followed by a complex explanation like you just did?
Sure, let's break it down with an example, and then a more detailed explanation. Simple example. Imagine you're learning to pronounce a new word. You have two rules. One that says you should pronounce the word clearly, faithfulness, and another that says you should make it easy to say, markedness. If your language values clarity more, you'll say the word exactly as it's spelled. If it values ease of pronunciation, you might simplify the word even if it means not pronouncing every letter. So, in optimality theory, you're choosing the best way to say the word based on which rule is more important in your language. Detailed explanation. Optimality theory operates on the idea that language forms are the result of competing constraints. Here's a detailed look. 1. Constraints. There are two main types: markedness constraints, which push for simpler, more natural forms, and faithfulness constraints, which push for forms that preserve the underlying representation of words as much as possible. 2. Generator. It generates all possible versions of how a word or sentence could be formed based on its underlying abstract form. For example, the word cats might be considered as cats, cats, cat. It evaluates these forms against the constraints. Higher ranked constraints will be satisfied first. If a form meets the highest priority constraints best, even if it violates lower ranked constraints, it is selected. For instance, if a language prefers clear pronunciation, faithfulness, but also simplifies sounds, markedness, the chosen form of a word will balance these constraints. If cats is pronounced as cats to simplify it, This would satisfy markedness constraints, but violate faithfulness constraints. The choice depends on which constraint is prioritized in that language. In essence, optimality theory shows how different languages might prioritize different constraints, leading to the variety of linguistic forms we see.
Now, give me more examples, more words under the markedness versus, functional, whatever. So there are two constraints, more examples.
Certainly. Let's look at a few more examples of how markedness and faithfulness constraints can interact. Example 1, English pluralization. English, the plural of cat is cats. The regular plural form adds an S sound at the end. Markedness constraint. Avoid complex or unusual sounds. Adding S to cat is straightforward and avoids complex changes. Faithfulness constraint. Preserve the original form of the word as much as possible. In English, cats is chosen because adding S is a simple, straightforward way to make plurals, satisfying the markedness constraint while still preserving the core form of the word. Example 2, Spanish vowel reduction. Spanish, in some dialects, the unstressed vowels in rapid speech might get reduced. For instance, despacio, slowly might be pronounced more like despacio with less emphasis on the vowels. Markedness constraint, favor simplified or faster pronunciation. Reducing vowels helps in faster, more fluid speech. Faithfulness constraint, preserve the exact vowel sounds. Here, markedness leads to vowel reduction in informal speech for ease, though it might not preserve the exact original vowel sounds. Example 3, Japanese consonant clusters. Japanese tends to avoid complex consonant clusters. For instance, in words borrowed from English like street, pronounced as sutorito. Markedness constraint, avoid complex consonant clusters. Japanese tends to simplify clusters to make pronunciation easier. Faithfulness constraint, keep the original cluster intact. In Japanese, street becomes sutorito to adhere to the markedness constraint of avoiding clusters, even though it deviates from the original pronunciation. Example 4, Korean final consonant reduction. Korean has a rule where final consonants can be simplified. For example, pop, meaning rice, may be pronounced as bap, but in casual speech it might sound like pap. Markedness constraint, simplify the final consonants. It makes pronunciation smoother and easier. Faithfulness constraint, preserve the final consonant sound. In Korean, the reduction of final consonants in informal context satisfies markedness constraints, but involves a change from the more precise pronunciation. These examples show how languages prioritize different constraints in different ways, leading to the diverse ways words can be pronounced and structured.
मेरा दिल तू निकले आना, तू कर दे, हाँ तू कर दे।